When I bought my DR650, I bought it for one reason, and that was to build an expedition-ready long-distance machine. I didn't buy it to create this super capable enduro bike or a chick magnet to ride around town. I mean, come on, let's be realistic about that. So in this video, I'm going to show you what modifications I've made to the DR650 to make it expedition long-distance ready, and what modifications I'm going to make in the future. So what are the criteria I was looking at when I was choosing a motorcycle for this expedition round the world ready machine? The first thing I was looking at was power. I mean, obviously a motorcycle has to have enough power with all that luggage on the back. The DR650 fit the criteria there. It's got great low-end torque. It's got enough mid-range torque. It's enough, right? It's not a super fast machine, but it does the job. It gets the job done. I mean, let's face it, as soon as you're outside your home country and off those fast roads and into more adventure type situations, you don't need a motorcycle that goes really fast. I mean, it's unnecessary. You need a motorcycle with a lot of torque to get you around. The next criteria I was looking at was simpleness. Not a computer on wheels, something that a farmer could fix. On the DR650, everything is super simple. Probably only the CDI and the stator pulse coil are the only things that would be difficult to fix out in the field. Everything else you can kind of fix. The next thing is a motorcycle that's easily serviced on the side of the road or fixed on the side of the road. I mean, the DR650, there's only 6 bolts you need to undo to get the seat off, the tank off, and you've got the guts of the whole motorcycle right in front of you, easily accessible. It's super easy, right? So the mechanical parts of the DR650 are super simple as well. It's gravity-fed fuel system. There's no fuel pump that could potentially break. There's no liquid cooling. It's oil cooled. Even if that fails, it's possible just to bypass that system. What else? Oil change 10 minutes, valve adjustments 30 minutes, super easy. The next criteria is I wanted a machine where it would be relatively easy to find spare parts around the world. The DR650 is a popular motorcycle around the world. One of the reasons for that is it's been around for so long. I think the first model came out in 1996. I've even heard that the Colombian police force have issued DR650s. So the next criteria I was looking for was a motorcycle that's relatively light. And that's not just because it's easier to handle in rough terrain, but also it's cheaper to ship it. The DR650 has long service intervals, oil changes every 6,000 kilometers, which is not bad. I mean, there are some bikes that have longer service intervals, obviously, but you know, that's acceptable. That's within acceptable range. It's only 10 minutes to change oil. And the last criteria I was looking for, which might seem a little bit odd, is a simple rigid steel frame. It's not any crazy new high-tech material. It's simple steel. And the reason why that's a good thing is because it's easy to fix. It's easy to weld. So every addition and every modification that I've done to the DR650 has a purpose. I don't do things just to make it look good. I'm not trying to put lipstick on the pig to make it look sexier. I don't care what it looks like. Everything I've done to it has a really good reason, and I'm going to show you each of them. The first 3 things I did are pretty standard that a lot of DR650 owners do. And the first thing is the clutch safety switch. So I was really surprised when I got the DR650 and hopped on it and discovered I couldn't start it until I figured out that you actually have to pull in the clutch to get it started. That's different from the other bikes I've owned. I don't know why, but anyway, so disabling that switch. So why would you want to disable that safety feature? Well, it's a point of failure, right? And so we were trying to eliminate every single point of failure. Something that could fail at the wrong moment, get rid of it. It's unnecessary. So probably the most obvious change that I've made is the front here. That's the Britannia fairing. I do try to buy Australian made whenever possible. I come from Australia, I live in Australia, and I care about that. But for whatever reason, I mean, there is a manufacturer here that makes these front fairings, very similar rally style fairings. For whatever reason, they never answered my emails, so I kind of had to give up on them. And anyway, I bought this from this company in Canada, and I'm pretty happy with it. It does what I want it to do. There are three main things that I want this to do and reasons why I bought it. The first reason is lots of room here on the front for stuff, right? Plugs, switches, a voltmeter, a place to put the GPS, and phone and switches. Yeah, so voltmeter, that's important. I think you need to monitor how much voltage you're using. The stator in the DR650 is rated at 200 watts, I think. Put that in comparison to a more modern motorcycle like a BMW, which is about 700 to 800 watts. So it is quite weak in terms of how well the DR650 can recharge itself. For that reason, you really need to monitor how many volts you're using, whether that's through your heated vest or heated grips, or I don't know, whatever else you got working here, your lights and your GPS and so on. So that's an important addition. I could have used the original speedometer here. I just decided to go with a simple endurance Trail Tech replacement. And that was really just because of room. I mean, not because it looks better. I have some switches here. This switch is connected to a circuit that's on all the time. It's disconnected from the ignition key, which means that I can have something working anywhere on the bike if I want to without the key, just by turning that switch on. And these other this one controls the USB, if I recall, and I think this one controls the GPS and a phone if it's connected. It just makes it easier to control what's eating your power and what isn't, without actually stopping and unplugging things. The second reason why I wanted this fairing is because of the windscreen. So I opted for the sports windscreen, I think this one's called. They've got two different types of windscreens. There's a larger one. This one I thought would be adequate for me, and that's just to keep the wind off my chest when you're on, long rides. It kind of wears you out pretty quick. And lastly, and probably obviously, is better lights at the front. So these are LED lights. The first benefit of LED lights is that they consume less power, so less draw on your charging system if you're running heated grips and so on. And the second reason, of course, is they're brighter. If I can turn them up, these are super bright lights, and they do a good job at night, a lot better than the stock DR650 lights. The next modification is this front sprocket guard replacement. The original guard, as you've probably realized, is covering the whole sprocket, and that's a place where a lot of dirt and mud can get caught up, and so just replaced it with this sprocket cover here, which makes it easier to clean. Just another thing about the front sprocket, they're great on the DR650. There's only 3 bolts to get it off. Easy replacement. Again, simplicity at its best. Next adjustment are these side covers, the Warp 9 side covers. There are 2 options with this one. I discovered when I was looking for protection for the engine case. There's the Warp 9s, which are kind of made of this plastic material, which I ended up buying. And then there's the BB Road, off-road ones, I think they're called. And you kind of glue those on, and they're made of metal, some kind of aluminium probably. I wasn't too keen on gluing anything on there that would be impossible basically to get off later. I don't know what would be a reason why you'd want to take them off once they're already on, but I just thought it was a messier solution. This one was cleaner. Plastic, I like that as a protection material because it's soft, right? So if a rock or something hits this hard, the plastic kind of absorbs some of that impact. But if it's steel, you know, there's almost no absorption there, and those vibrations would travel behind that steel anyway. I don't know whether that would do damage, but anyway, that was a thing. One of the first modifications I did was the seat, and I went for the Seat Concept seat, the DIY one, which is where you basically use the original DR seat, take the cover off, and the stock foam, and then just replace it with Seat Concepts. And yeah, I gotta say, it's a hell of a lot more comfortable, and yeah, it does the job like everything else. The next thing I did was removed the stock standard tool case that comes with the DR650. It's pretty small and doesn't really hold that much, it's kind of useless, and replaced it with this tube solution here. And as you can see, there's a lot more room in there for tools, which is storage is key. To install this, I had to remove the helmet lock up here, but that was fine. The next modifications I did was the lighting. I wanted to swap out all the lights on this bike for LED options. First reason being that LED is brighter. Second reason is that it draws less power from the system. So I opted for these, and I forget what they're called actually. But anyway, they're pretty cool. They plug in and out. So, you know, if you're going to do enduro riding or something where you're likely to drop the bike a lot, like me, if you want, you can just take these out, right, and put them in your pocket, and save them from getting broken. And then at the end of your ride, when you're back on the highway, plug them back in and you're good to go. I also changed the brake light on the back here with an LED one. Easy fix, get these off eBay. They're a hell of a lot brighter and they draw a lot less power also. The next modification is the bash plate here, and you can see that I went for a plastic option again. It's the Ergonomics plate, which is really thick plastic. I don't know how thick that is, but it's pretty damn thick, and it's good enough. You know, a thing about using the metal ones is that you know, they can be a bit noisy, you know, with all the rocks sort of pinging against them, and these Ergonomics ones, they kind of absorb the vibration and absorb the impact a bit better, and so in my mind it's good enough. And yeah, one of the more expensive modifications I did, which I think is probably the most important, and I think it's probably one of the first things that a lot of people should do when they get a DR650, is the suspension. So with the front there, it's got the Cogent Dynamics drop-in cartridges, changed up the fork oil, I think to 4 weight by memory, and new springs, better springs. And I noticed the difference right away. One of the things that freaked me out about this machine is that when you put the front brake on, it dives forward, used to dive forward. So replacing the springs, the fork oil, and putting these cartridges in kind of fixed that, and it's just a softer ride, you know. I mean, it's not a complete hovercraft yet, but it's certainly a massive improvement from stock. And the other thing I did, I also installed Cogent shock on the back, the Mojave one, and with a 8.15 kilogram spring. And that's heavy enough to carry me and a lot of luggage. Also a massive improvement, and highly recommended. Expensive, but you know. The next massive improvement that's really critical on the DR650 is a fuel filter. So it actually comes with a little fuel filter stock standard in here, just at this entry into the carburetor here. The problem is it's really tiny, it's really small, and it kind of looks like it doesn't do anything at all. So these aftermarket fuel filters are cheap, easy to install, and well worth it. One thing that I'm probably going to do also, although I haven't done it yet, eventually when this bike does go on expeditions, is an in-tank fuel filter. So there'll be two fuel filters. It kind of looks like a sock that goes inside here, kind of like a reverse condom kind of a thing, that filters the fuel first, and then you get a secondary filter action happening here, and that really, you know, sorts out your carburetor so that it's not all gunked up. Okay, so other modifications. I changed the mirrors. So the stock standard DR mirrors are really iconic, actually. It's the first thing you notice on a DR, those big square waffle shaped kind of mirrors. They're kind of kind of a bit dated. So these are the double take mirrors. These are awesome, you know. They give a better field of vision, but the other thing is that you know, you can fold these away you know, if you don't need them, and you don't want them to get broken, less likely to get broken. The next modification is the handlebars. The stock handlebars on the DR650 again are atrocious. They're licorice, you know. You drop your bike and they bend too easy, which is fine if you can just bend it back, but I mean, you know, how much stress can handlebars take over time? These are Renthal twin walls. They're a lot fatter here, which means I also had to replace these things, whatever they're called, clamps here. They're a lot fatter here, which means I also had to change the clamps, but you know, they're not expensive, that's cheap. And these new grips came with them as well. The standard DR650 grips are pretty shit, so these are good as well. What else? Of course, everyone who buys an adventure motorcycle, one of the first things they do is install bark busters or handguards, or you know, the various brands that there are. I went for bark busters. It's a Aussie brand. They do the trick. They're fairly robust, good enough. The next essential modification is these stand things. Kind of, I don't know what they're called, but this is basically a piece of metal that's screwed onto the end of the stand. Why would you want that? Well, you know, if you're in soft ground, you've got a heavy bike, the last thing you want happening is leaning your bike up like this on the stand and then it toppling over because of the weight. This is one way to sort of spread that weight a little better, so that it doesn't fall over. One thing you might be noticing is that it's the stock exhaust pipe on here. I don't consider buying a new exhaust pipe critical to an expedition machine. A lot of people, when they buy a new bike, that's the first thing that they upgrade, and me too. You know, when I had my last cafe racer, that was the first thing I did, was upgrade the stock exhaust pipes to make it sound amazing. But you know, this is a nice quiet exhaust pipe, which is what I want. I don't want anything loud. I don't want to damage my hearing. I don't want to be riding through remote areas making a big racket and a big noise, and I don't want a loud engine noise that's too loud. I've kept the stock one. It sounds like a quiet little sewing machine, which is what I want. I don't want anything noisy. So those are the changes that I've done so far to the Expedition build DR650. Some of the other changes that I've got coming up include bigger footrests. I just haven't gotten around to buying those or installing those yet. A way to move the breather pipes a little higher. There's a way to do that. I don't want to be going through water and the carburetor sucking in any air. That's an easy fix. Maybe next time I do an oil change, changing the oil filter to something stainless steel that can be washed, not paper. Oh, and a big change that I want to do actually probably next is installing braided brake lines, right? So one thing that I noticed with the DR650 is that the brakes are absolute shit. I thought it was that because they were really new or new brake pads or something, that's why they were so weak, but it's just I was used to Brembo brakes on my last bike and forgot how bad stock brakes can be. So an easy way to upgrade the brakes quickly and get them working a lot better, noticeably better, is to upgrade the fuel lines to the braided ones, the steel braid. And why that works so well is because when you pump the brakes, the existing brake lines expand, and that kind of messes with the oil pressure. And so braided lines are a lot stiffer, and so it makes the brakes more responsive, if that makes sense. Another thing I'm looking at installing is an automatic chain oiler. I'm in two minds about that. The terrain here in Australia is dusty usually, so it's quite important to have really good air filters. But that dust mixing with oil can create kind of like a paste that wears things down, the opposite of what you want. So I'm in two minds about whether I want an automatic oil changer that's just going to constantly create this, abrasive paste all the time, or if it's actually going to be worth it. Another thing I want to change is the sprockets. I haven't figured out what sprockets yet, whether I want a 15 tooth or a 14 tooth at the front and what I want at the back. I need to play around with that a bit more to figure out what's optimal. And finally, the exhaust system. I know that I said the stock exhaust is fine, at least for me. It still is kind of heavy, and I guess the only reason why I would want to change it or upgrade it is to reduce the weight a lot more. So that's my DR650 Expedition build. Thanks for watching.